Our next speaker, Professor Viktoria Lysenko. She's the head of the Department of Oriental Philosophies at the Institute of Philosophy, the Russian Academy of Science in Moscow. She's a distinguished philosopher, works on consciousness and Indian philosophy. And Victoria is going to stay in her seat and control her PowerPoint from here. So thank you.
We have just come back from our wonderful lunch. Enjoying it was quite different. In my report, in my paper, I will talk about this subjective, private way of experience the world, which are called in the modern parlance qualia. The term qualia refers to properties of sense experience, which being subjective, unique, and non-transmissible or reported by their very nature, constitute modes of experiencing the world characteristic of each human being, but accessible only from the first-person perspective. In the most promising, in my opinion, contemporary scientific theories of consciousness, the notion of qualia is viewed as an obstacle to their final triumph. Qualia remain the last bastion of subjectivity, of privacy, of intimacy, which cannot be taken by assault with the help of purely objective scientific methods. Until now, to my knowledge, the modern philosophers dealing with consciousness do not frequently refer to the heritage of the Buddhist schools that go by the name of Abhidharma, Vaibhashika and Sautrantika, the specialists of the Dharma analysis. As well as many achievements of the Buddhist logician and epistemologists are not very demanded by the modern cognitive sciences. The focus of contemporary philosophers who are interested in Buddhism is the Madhyamaka school, with its ideas of emptiness and relativity. This is due to the fact that the dialogue with the modern science is conducted on the initiative of His Holiness Dalai Lama and Tibetan Buddhists, who are the modern successors of this very school of Madhyamaka. My approach to qualia takes into consideration two different perspectives of inquiring. The first one is the question: could the Buddhist concept system match the modern concept of qualia in terms of the contemporary definitions and criteria of the later? The second, which problems associated with qualia in contemporary philosophical discussion could be formulated in the framework of the Buddhist philosophical systems, namely those of Abhidharma and Sautrantika Yogacara, the school of logic and epistemology. For example, from the point of view of the modern theories of qualia, we can draw some parallels between qualia and the notion of dharmas pertaining to different Abhidharma schools. However, if we follow the second approach, the problem of qualia could be formulated only in those schools which acknowledge, thematized, and problematized the distinction between the first and the third person perspectives. That's what I'm going to explain in this paper. Referring to the fundamental Buddhist idea of dharmas as ultimate elements of experience, we can find some significant overlap with some modern concepts of qualia. The very tendency of Buddhism to analyze not the world as such, but primarily the world as it is given to us in our experience, the world processed by our cognitive tools. This very approach may somehow bring together Dharma and qualia theories, no matter how Dharmas are interpreted in different Buddhist schools. Thus, we could call the Buddhist approach to reality an experiential one. To know the world means not only to think about it, to know about it, but first of all to experience it, to live it through our bodies. We may compare this approach with the modern concept of embodied or inertive cognition by Varela and others. This attitude may be considered as the result of three important Buddhist principles. First, which are known in the Buddhist terms as trilakshana, three characteristics, or trilakshana in Pali. First is impermanence, anityata. Second is non-self or selflessness, anatta. And the third, I translate the term dukkha as unsatisfactoriness. The lack of a permanent and enduring inner core as self, atman, or substance. In all phenomena we observe outside or inside ourselves induces restlessness, anxiety, frustration, suffering. These terms I may suggest as the possible translations of the term dukkha. In modern philosophical language, this attitude is often called anti-essentialism. Essentialism means to take something as a constant essence, as endurable substance. If for the Buddha all phenomena or all dharmas were just something which has its beginning and its end, the Buddhist thinkers after the Buddha moved to a quite radical view of the Kshanikavada. Kshanikavada, kshana means a moment. This is the idea that all things are momentary. Nothing endures, inside or outside. So the theory of dharmas has become tightly interconnected with the notion of Kshanikavada, and dharmas were regarded as momentary elements of experience. In this anti-essentialist model, we can see that the concept of interconnection between cause and effect could not be the same as in the essentialist model, where we have one cause and one effect. For example, we have a seed and the plant. The seed is the cause of the plant. In the Buddhist Kshanikavada and Dharma theory-oriented system, the causality is much more complex. So there is no one cause, no one effect, but multiplicity of causes and conditions and their effects. It is a sort of network of causally interrelated phenomena. It is very important to understand that the things which we perceive as saying independent units or independent things, in fact are connected with everything else. and we have not just a general impression of interconnectedness, but in Buddhism, it is elaborated a very complicated and logically consistent system, which we call Hetu Pratyaya Phala classifications, in which we have for Hetu, causes, 6 Pratyaya and 5 Phala, 5 results. According to this system, we have 4 kinds of causes, but all the other factors are regarded as conditions, and each condition has its own function in the producing of the cause, and its importance depends on its contribution in the producing of the effect. The occurrence of the dharmas has been interrelated in a diachronic as well as in a synchronic perspective. In Abhidharma text, we find a review and classification of all these causes and conditions in Abhidharma Kosha of Vasubandhu. But one may suppose that what are dharmas? How dharmas could be individual if we have the classifications of dharmas in which are singled out from 75 to 100 types of dharma. How could these dharmas be individual if they are divided into kinds? Kinds could not be individual. But still, in Buddhism, dharma are individual. They are numerically different because each dharma has its kshana, the moment in which it realizes its function. It is the first thing. And the second thing is that every dharma occurs in a set of situations, samaya. And this situation defines its specificity. From the practical point of view, discerning dharmas has its source in meditative introspection, smriti or sati. It's a sort of scanning of the internal contents of the individual experience and its representation as a complex, multifactorial processes. The goal of the Buddhist meditation was purely soteriological, to inspect, to identify and to remove the obstacles to spiritual progress, called defilements or kleshas, in the mind of practitioners. A peculiar analysis, peculiar because it does not involve any cognitive functions and any rational program. So this is the analysis of the actual contents of consciousness, which was applied to cognitive activity as well, to experience of emotions and feelings. This analysis consisted in a comprehensive inventory of observable dharmas and in an identification of the status of each of them according to different classification systems developed in the Abhidharma, like ayatanas, dhatus, khandhas. I don't have time, unfortunately, to get in details of these classifications. But believe me, they are very rational. In the Sarvastivada or Vaibhashika school, this is the realistic school of Abhidharma, all dharmas are real. It means that all dharmas of the past, present, and future are real. So they exist. That is the reason why it was called Sarvastivada, Sarva Asti, everything exists. So they are regarded as a discrete factors of qualitative identity, and as minimal quanta of dynamic processes. They may obtain their identity only in individual series, where some dharma disappearing or performing its function conditions the occurrence of the other dharma in the same series. Dharmas form a true texture of reality, every moment of which is unique and different from the other moments. Some modern authors interpret dharmas as tropes, individual properties, atoms of qualitative identity, distributed at space-time points. The phenomenal world emerges from them like a picture printed by the dot matrix printer. If we take as example the Vaibhashika idea that all dharmas exist, which I already mentioned, the dharmas of the present time, as compared with the dharmas of the past and future, have a special capacity which is called activity, karitra. So they are realizing their function actually. That is why it has seemed to me that the very good metaphor to render dharma into our modern, to introduce it into our modern mode of imagining things, of metaphorical images, it would be spike. We talked a lot about spikes yesterday. Spike, even in modern neurological terminology, it's a kind of metaphor. It's not a strict scientific term, it's a metaphor. It may also serve as a metaphor in our explanation of the Buddhist Dharma. Why not? Because in the final analysis, dharmas are this moment of experience that are imagining and distinct themselves at the moment of their appearing. After that, they disappear, and it looks like in imagery we can imagine it like a flash, like a spike. Of course, we will not develop this into a kind of translation of literal translation of the dharmas. But to translate the dharmas, it is not possible to refer to one word because every word has its associations. And dharma are a very meaning-charged notions and terms, and they couldn't be translated literally. So I prefer to refer to some metaphors to render the meanings of the dharma. So, according to the theory of dharmas, our experience is totality, the totality of qualitatively heterogeneous flows of microphenomena. Vasubandhu, the great Abhidharma philosopher, defined dharmas as that which carries its own sign. In this sense, the idea of dharmas may be compared with the modern idea of qualia, which are also regarded by the supporters of qualia as self-sufficient, self-sustainable phenomena accessible only introspectively. As the Russian philosopher and Buddhist scholar Anton Rosenberg justly remarks with regard to Abhidharma analysis, the epistemological question of the reality of the external world, or the reality of the objects in the external world, as well as the question of the metaphysical essence of being is still not resolved. The talk is only about the fact that a human being experiencing a certain phenomenon, seeing, for example, the sun, consists of such and such elements that are in such and such relationship. The subject of analysis is a man seeing the sun, not a man and the sun separately. We must not forget that for the Buddhist, all reasoning is directed to the question of emancipation of living beings, and therefore the question concerning the nature of sun as such is not important. Since we are dealing with a man seeing the sun, the Buddhist see in such a phenomenon a combination of a number of elements like mind, ability, or act of perception, something luminous, something round, etc., etc. All these elements together provide what we call the man seeing the sun. This work was firstly published in 1980 because Rosenberg, he was a disciple of Theodor Shcherbatsky, famous Russian Buddhologist, but he died when he was only 31 years old. He died during the Civil War in Russia. But I think that his vision of Buddhism is much more modern than that of his famous teacher. Even in Vaibhashika, a school of direct realism, I didn't mention it yet, but I have to explain to you that among these Abhidharma schools, there were different approaches to reality. The Vaibhashikas were direct realists. That is, they believe in the existence of the external reality, external things. While the other school, Sautrantika, the name comes from their reliance on the sutras, while the Vaibhashikas rely on the Vibhasha, on the commentaries to the Buddhist canonical text. So the Sautrantika are termed in the modern philosophical language as representialists. They believe that we can not we have no access to the reality. We may deal with the reality only through our representation, internal mental representations of the object. So they were also realists, but not direct realists. One may say it's a kind of indirect realism. So we can also compare the notion of qualia with that of akara, or mental image, mental form in Sautrantika. But it were the Buddhists, which we used to call epistemologists, like Dignaga and Dharmakirti. So I forgot to tell about some Vaibhashika notions. Even they believed in the external object. Okay, so but these external objects were for them not the object themselves, but the properties of this object experienced by us. For example, the famous Mahabhuta theories, which is shared by the majority of Indian philosophical schools, in the naturalistic perspective, the Mahabhutas, or the elements of reality, were always singled out by their properties. But these properties are just what we can sense, what we can experience. That means that what we can see, it is a property of color, form. It belongs to the fire. Then the sound belongs to the sound belongs to the akasha, the ether element. The smell belongs to the earth. The taste belongs to water, and the wind, the fourth element, belongs to the surface of the skin and is correlated with touch. From the modern point of view, all these properties are qualia. Now I will return to Buddhist epistemologists. So in my opinion, they came closest to the concept of qualia. In his theory of pramanas, or instruments of valid cognition, Dignaga, who lived in 5th century, was perhaps the first Buddhist philosopher or Indian philosopher to introduce the idea of raw sensation or perception free from mental constructions or conceptualization, nirvikalpa pratyaksha or kalpana apodha pratyaksha. He distinguished it from the cognition with mental constructions or conceptualizing cognition, savikalpaka jnana. According to him, nirvikalpaka and savikalpaka are quite different, even mutually exclusive modes of cognitive experience, but not just different phases in the cognition of one and the same object, as other Indian philosophers believed. I mean the Vaisheshika and NIAS. When we first perceive an object in an indefinite form as something without any specific qualifications, like in sensation, raw sensation, and then we distinguish its characteristics in a conceptual form. Like in a perceptual judgment, this is a cow. According to Dignaga, raw or immediate perception and perceptual judgments are different modes of cognition because their objects are different. The objects of immediate perceptions are called svalakshanas, which means characterized by itself in the sui, while the objects of cognition with mental constructions are generalized characteristics, samanya lakshanas. He specially highlights the fact that the initial perceptual experience at every given moment has as its object something that never goes beyond its own actually present content, and thus may characterize only itself. It is something quite particular and unique. We have a clear reference to the Svalakshana's nature in his famous treatise Pramana Samuchaya. So the object of sense is the form which is to be cognized simply as it is and which is inexpressible. Mental constructions appear in perceptual judgments which do not belong to the instrument of valid knowledge, pramana, but still mental construction became a part of another instrument of valid knowledge, anumana, logical inference, which was directed towards objects possessing common features, samanya lakshana. In this respect, svalakshana appear as a kind of mere presence, sheer actuality. They cannot undergo any external influence, as well as exercise their own influence on the other svalakshanas. They could not be expressed in words or conceptualized. The svalakshanas cannot be extended to the other things, in contrast to the mental constructions and conceptualizations. Thus, svalakshanas are regarded as some momentary, unique, always new and self-defining phenomena which could not be classified in types, while samanya lakshanas are enduring and stable types. It is in quite a similar manner that qualia are presented in modern literature, where they are described as intrinsic, non-representational properties. If we refer to the famous thought experiment about the case of Mary, a brilliant color scientist who lived all her life in a white and a black room, the Buddhist answer will be that all information that Mary has got about colors was in terms of samanya lakshanas, general characteristics, but she had no direct experience of the svalakshanas, which could be only unique and private. Due to the lack of time, I cannot go into further details of the Buddhist concept of svalakshanas, which is quite problematic in many respects. I can just mention several efforts to translate this term by Theodore Sherbatsky, who wrote a lot about Buddhist epistemology, and I think that all his translation may be regarded as true, but depending on the context. So these translations are bare, point instant, ultimate particular, and even the Kantian thing in itself. So much about the first problematization. The second question is, which problems associated with qualia in contemporary philosophical discussion could be formulated in the framework of the Buddhist philosophical system? I may suggest that svalakshanas constitute the first person perspective, while samanya lakshanas the third person or intersubjective perspective. But this my interpretation needs more development, and I will leave it to the other occasion. In modern philosophy of consciousness, the problem of qualia is tightly connected with that of the subjectivity of our experience. In the Buddhist theory of consciousness, the problem of subjectivity so the problem of subjectivity is formulated without referring to any permanent subject or self. Some Buddhist scholars call it the minimal sense of self, which is reduced to the sensation that this or that experience is mine and does not belong to any other person. As I already forgot about the time, excuse me, I will come to my next slide. So I think that the most important notion in connection with this problem is the Buddhist notion of svasamvedana. Svasamvedana, self-awareness, which is considered by the Buddhists as a form of immediate or raw perception. I don't have time to show you the text and to analyze them. I just want to stress the fact that this concept has been proved through some very interesting arguments, like the argument of memory. The fact that one can recall one's previous cognition proves that any cognitive act includes not only a previous sense experience of the object, but also a previous cognitive awareness of this experience. Otherwise, it would be impossible to remember it. I just summarized the text of Dharmakirti. If we refer us to the modern philosophy of consciousness, we find quite similar classification of awareness into pre-reflexive awareness and reflexive awareness, which coincides literally with the division which we know from the Buddhist philosophy between self-illumination, svaprakasha, and other illumination theories. And in modern philosophy, we are talking about first order self-illumination phases, svaprakasha, and higher order phases, reflected theories. And I also must refer to the phenomenological division phenomenological idea of pre-reflexive self-consciousness, which belongs to the very nature of consciousness as distinguished from reflective self-consciousness. And I'm coming right to my conclusions. So I suggest that the Buddhist approach is quite close to that of phenomenology, and that both may provide some arguments for those cognitive scientists who try to defend qualia against the attacks of functionalists. At the same time, the term qualia cannot be applied to Buddhism in its entire range of meanings, because the Buddhist division between subjectivity and objectivity does not bear any clear ontological implications, as both are included in the realm of personal experience, where we could find a sort of not very pronounced distinction between subject and object. Therefore, the qualia do not play in Buddhism the role of counterbalancing any objectivist strategy. However, in spite of that, the term qualia helps us to underline the importance of the first-person perspective in the Buddhist presentation of the world, and by this to expand its explanatory power beyond its traditional Western borders of discourse to the other cultural topos. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very much, Professor Lysenko.